Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another series in our webinar, monthly webinar series for Stellar Access. My name is Sergio Lucero. I'm the COO for Stellar Access. I want to welcome you today to our episode. We have an exciting conversation on perspectives in space. What perspectives means to you and me, what perspectives means to the audience, and how we can bring those perspectives into commercializing space. Our goal at Stellar Access is to educate, innovate, and inspire on all things in space, especially commercial space. Commercial space is blossoming right now, and Stellar Access is at the pinnacle of what commercial space will be in the future. With us today is Sarah Kalmeta, also known as Sarah the Pivoter. She's a professional speaker, a podcast host, and a published poet who helps transform perspectives with organizations and people that are facing change. I met Sarah at a New Worlds conference that was put on by the Earthlight Foundation, and she gave me some interesting perspectives from her viewpoint, and I would like for her to share a little bit more about herself today.
Thank you, Sergio. It's so great to be here. And yes, we met at the Space Cowboy Ball and throughout the conference. And so we certainly got to enjoy many different perspectives at the New Worlds event last year. So as Sergio mentioned, I'm a professional speaker. My background has been aviation and aerospace for the last 15 years. And I do a lot with the Earthlight Foundation as well as Space Kind, which is a space leadership training program. And I'm excited to dive into why we need to open up our minds and how we can do that in space and start to merge creativity with the technical, because we really do need both for innovation.
Yeah, the Earthlight Foundation was a great conference where we brought together the creative people the creative people from the space industry and the technical people to be able to share and open up opportunities for everybody. It was an opportunity to enjoy perspectives, like as we're talking about, that have never been offered before. So one of the most enjoyable things about the conference for me was the fact that we had poets like yourself, showing us and guiding us through the softer side of space and how we can bring about those people that have a more creative mindset into the ecosystem and guide our technical people to think more creatively on how we go and move forward in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really awesome from my perspective as well to be asked to read my poem. And also Rick Tumlinson and Cyan Proctor shared their poetry because they both have written a poem entitled Earthlight. And my poem was Moonlight, and it had just been published that same month. And so it was really special to be able to share that. And the biggest compliment that I received was from Andy Aldrin, Dr. Andy Aldrin, who came to me at the end of the night and said, Sarah, I'm not much of a fan of poetry. That's not really my thing, but I really enjoyed your poem today. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I actually came up to you as well after that,
yes.
your poem, and said that was very touching, something that I know as a space enthusiast, I'm very passionate about what I've been doing for 28 years in space technically. But you really brought out an aspect of myself, and I'm sure of the audience, that I wasn't really tuned into, and that's the creative aspect of what we're talking about here today. And I'm sure everybody on the audience here has those creative elements. All of us scientists and engineers, we are creative people by nature. It's on the technical side, but it's still creative. The goal now is to really align that creativity with those that have more of the arts and entertainment and music, and bring that together with the technical. And that's what we at Stellar Access are trying to push, and that's what we want to focus our discussion on.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we talked about when we were getting this set up was Leonardo da Vinci, right? He was not just a scientist or an engineer or an artist. He was all of those things. And he really brought in the different elements that are required. And some of you may not know this, but Cyan Proctor, her nickname is Leo. And a lot of people assume that that stands for low Earth orbit, when actually it was given to her as her call sign for being a modern day Leonardo da Vinci, because she's a pilot, she's a poet, she has all of these different skill sets. She's a geologist, analog astronaut, a real astronaut in space as well. And all of those things combined give you a different perspective and allow you to look at things from a different light. And it's very often that because we're so far into a technical detail that we start to operate in silos, and we start to mistake perfection in this silo, and then the whole system is affected, right? And so when we can bring in the artistic eye or the method from music, then we can start to understand what that ripple effect is, and why it's so important to be able to zoom in and out of these different perspectives.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about this earlier as we were preparing for this podcast, that we all have creative elements. And one of the things that I recalled as we were talking was the creativity that I expressed when I was growing up, and didn't realize that I would use that in my career here in the future.
Yeah.
And one of them was, I had mentioned that when I was a young kid, my mom would sew our clothes for us and for the family. And I would visit with her and go to the store to pick up patterns for clothing, and then come back and help her cut out the clothing. I didn't do much of the sewing, although sometimes I tried to dive into it. But on the pattern side, I would cut those out, and it was always fascinating to me how those flat pieces would turn into 3D, 3D articles of clothing that people could wear, that my sisters could wear, that I could wear. And so there was an artistic, creative, almost like inspiration of, hey, there's something here that I want to hone into and do a little bit more about. I didn't realize I would end up an engineer, but still, that kind of propelled my creativity at the time.
I love that. It's often in childhood that we are all creative, right? Every human has this creative aspect, but in childhood, it can either be encouraged or discouraged based on what the focus was in your household or school or the era, right? And when we go back to those things that used to fascinate us, that used to really light us up as kids, it's really interesting to start to draw parallels to how that thinking might actually already be showing up in the way that we create the designs, in the way that we build the systems, in the way that we create 3D models. And so going back and reflecting on some of those activities in childhood is really powerful, because you can bring your awareness to what you might already be doing today and understand that you are indeed creative.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I used to build little spacecraft out of toothpicks. Actually, I didn't have Legos. I didn't actually know much about Legos, but I built spacecraft out of toothpicks. And there was a popular show on TV. It was a cartoon, Star Blazers, I think was the name of it. And I love the spacecraft that was built from that. Actually, it was supposed to be a warship that was transformed into a spaceship. I love watching that every week or whenever it was on. I would build those spaceships, and then at that point is when I realized I want to do this as a career, and it led for me to start drawing and putting it on paper before I actually put them on, started gluing things together. And again, that's what sparked the creative element that brings about those ideas that then propel us into careers like yourself, right, as a creative, or myself as a technical person. But yeah, creativity is all around us, and part of what we're trying to do here today is make sure that we communicate that creativity to everybody, and make sure that invite that creativity into our ecosystem, because the only way we're going to truly commercialize space is by inviting those that are able to push us beyond just the technical and dream up the activities that are possible, and not only possible, that are going on right now. We just don't even know it.
Absolutely. And, but by allowing yourself to play, Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, creativity is intelligence having fun. Right. And so when we can allow ourselves to play with well, what if this was possible? What if I could do it that way? What if there was another way? Right. I mean, the very nature of science is that, you test new information, you test hypotheses, and as we either approve or disapprove of the theory, we then have the law. But then the law might change later down the line. Again, as we have different equipment, as we have new information, as we start to draw our better understanding. And even right now, there's conversation about, the universe has been expanding, but it's not at a constant rate. They've realized it's different in different sections. So that means we have to go back to the drawing board, right? And so a lot of our understanding or laws are only that way until they're not, right? So allowing ourselves to play devil's advocate and play with it, have fun with it, is going to be what really allows us to innovate. And, you mentioned, I love that you refer to me as a creative also, because for most of my life, I would have never described myself that way. And I have a friend as well, who you met at New Worlds, Bailey Burns, and recently she got called a creative, and she's like, "I'm an engineer, but they called me a creative. I'm pretty excited about this." And what I think that implies is that all of us have this innate ability to be creative. It's just that we haven't allowed it as much attention in our lives as the technical sides. And so as we begin to play more in those areas, at the time we meet other people, that's their perception of us. And so it's really fun to go back through your recent interactions and just get those reflections from other people, because when we allow those parts to come forward, then we start to spark different ways of thinking. And then that can spark a conversation, which invites you to think in a new way, which invites you to look at maybe a problem you've been facing, or something that all of a sudden you've solved. There's a lot of science, innovation, technology that someone from an outside industry all of a sudden finds themselves here, and they transfer some process or some technology or an idea over, and all of a sudden they fix it, or they create this thing that everybody thinks it's, whoa, how did you get that? But it's because they had the unique perspective and they don't know what's not possible. So they just try.
Right. And what's exciting about our field right now, especially with space commercialization, is the fact that it is almost like a Wild West. It's open for, new ideas, policy, obviously law. There are a lot of discussions being held right now about what kind of world do we want to live in orbit that is Earth law applicable to, space law, those type of things. But even on not getting too much deep into the political spectrum, but also in the creative side, is coming up with those ideas of how do we take what we've known space to be for a long time. And it's been really restricted to government contracting and governments, being the ones that have access to space, to those ideas that propel those companies that are building the structures, building the space stations and the platforms that are going to take us to the moon. How do we guide them with ensuring that they have they implement the creative elements of people like yourself and like ourselves, like anybody? Obviously, we all have creativity to be able to push beyond just the technical, and to be able to offer opportunities for everybody, to have access to space, not just those that can afford it, but
Right.
those that can go up there personally, as an adventure, as a tourist, or those that can have access by sending items up there, by collaborating with other companies that are going up there. Those are all opportunities for engagement of, the rest of the world, the rest of us, right, that do not have immediate access right now.
You bring up a very good point, and this was something that was actually discussed on Monday during the Earthlight Foundation's Earth Space Day event. So, Earthlight Foundation wanted to connect the dots between Earth and space because a lot of people think of them as separate things, when in fact, Earth is in space. We're not going to it, we're just like walking from one part of the system to the next. And really we need to care about the environment around the earth, not just on the earth. And so our evolution of this idea came about. Everyone started calling it Earth Space Day on the discussions we were having. And Frank White mentioned that he was there for the first Earth Day in 1970. And now he's here for the first Earth Space Day. And we're hoping that this can create a movement of awareness on why space should be cared about. Why is it something that we want the general population to have interest in and to support and understand? And then in line with that, it was commented that we really need to do better marketing to Gen A, Generation Alpha. And we need to bridge those gaps. And so how do we do that? By getting creative, right? We have more mainstream space awareness, but there's still this idea of it's expensive, it's a waste of resources, when in fact, a lot of the fact that we can do this right now as a webinar, baby formula, iPhones, right? All of these technologies that we use in our day-to-day lives exist because of our space exploration, because of this research and development. And so it's important we start to find creatives, people who have influence, the change makers of our world, and we align with them and have them help us push this narrative out so that people understand it's not just for rocket scientists. It's not just for engineers. It's not just for billionaires. It's for all of us. And we can all touch it in unique ways. We can all add value and we can all receive value. And I think in this way, we can start to change the narrative.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah. Part of our goal with Stellar Access is to, our tagline is bringing space to your neighborhood, and we do that. We're doing that by ensuring that every neighborhood on Earth, we hope, has accessibility, which a lot of neighborhoods do now already with the advent of satellites, obviously, and phones and navigation and all that. At least a lot of the developed world has that access. So continuing to figure out how we bring about that that access through the connections we make with people like yourselves and with people in the audience. One of the reasons we want to put this webinar together is we want you all to also bring your perspectives on what is it that enables you to become part of space that is not within your job, right? It's a lot of us work in the space industry already, and have that access that way. But what other ways, what other perspectives can you bring to the table? How can you engage others within your community, your friend group? Sometimes we talk to our friends, and it just seems far off for them for what we're talking about. Space stations on the Earth, or a space station on the moon, or a hotel on the moon. It just seems like that's way too far off, and we got to make those connections for them. We're going to connect those dots and make sure that they realize that space is accessible right now. We need your creativity to come and help us, and your perspectives to come and help us figure out how we engage everybody to be able to, bring space to every neighborhood.
That's a great point, Sergio. And as you were speaking about the fact that a lot of neighborhoods do have access to satellites, right? Their television, their phones. There's still a bit of a disconnect because people don't think about space when they have the phone in their hand. They might be aware that there's a 5G satellite somewhere out there, or their satellite dish on their roof. If you think about the old school like DirecTV things that had to come and get installed. But there's still a bit of a disconnect in that they're receiving this technology and they're interacting with it, but their awareness is not connected to the space element. Mm-hmm. And so understanding how we can do that is going to be really critical. And so going out and having conversations and going to schools, one of the initiatives with Earthlight Foundation is Dreamscopes, and getting a telescope in every middle school in America and helping them experience that awe, to look up and see what's out there, and, sharing images from, the Hubble and James Webb telescopes, and showing this evolution, getting them excited, right? When the kids love this stuff. I mean, I remember watching the Magic School Bus, and my favorite episode was the one where they went to space and they went to all the different planets. I could still probably tell you exactly every scene in that 20-minute episode. And on Monday's event, Frank White actually shared several videos of these astronauts who have been to space, and their explanation of what they felt when they looked back at Earth. And so this is another reason why having creatives in the space industry as an integral part and partner to all of the more technical aspects is so important, because they will have the ability to language these experiences, which are usually ineffable, very difficult to describe, and they will help connect through different mediums, whether that's art, music, poetry, the ability for others to experience that awe, and they can help to express it in a more nuanced way than perhaps someone who is more used to a very technical language pattern due to their, background, their way of working, etc.
Yeah, that brings another, story that I have regarding creatives and how I got into the more creative aspect of my career as well. Before I do that, though, I'd invite you, the people, the audience, to put in questions that Sarah and I can address as we talk through these perspectives in space, and maybe even share with us how you've been able to either change perspectives or bring different perspectives to your community, to people about how to engage in space and how to, again, provide access to space for all. So the story I had in mind was when I first came to work here on the International Space Station program. I got hired to manage a creative team that did education and outreach for the science that was being done, the science and research that was being done on the space station. Now, I'm an engineer, that's my background, and I was managing a lot of scientists, a lot of writers and photographers and digital people and social media people, all these different perspectives, again, from industry that I had never managed before. I had managed technical people, I managed technicians, I had managed engineers. And so one of the things I realized, what I needed to change my mindset, my approach to how we solved the engagement problem, how we solved the outreach problem. It was not about technical. It was not about, wowing them with all the technical background about how the station is rotating on around the Earth, but it was really the human element and what made, the connection between us as a species and what's going on the space station. And I was able to do that by bringing in and hiring people that I could not tell stories, or at least I didn't think I could. I mean, now I feel like I'm a little bit more creative than I realized. But I was able to bring in people that were the writers, that were able to push that forward, and were able to take on an organization essentially in NASA where we were working that was not used to engaging in social media or in Twitter at the time, was not used to doing these more creative elements. But these people brought in that perspective that I knew they had, and they really taught me how to get through it and really how to manage people like that to be able to be more engaging.
That's excellent. Yeah, and it's a skill set, but fundamentally human beings are storytellers. Some have much more flair, of course, but it's a story as old as time, sitting around a campfire, listening to stories, right? We enjoy this. We connect through storytelling. And so while it may not be as natural for some of us, even the most gregarious person, I've been labeled an extreme extrovert before. I will still sometimes struggle to craft a story that I don't get in my head about, right? Am I connecting? Am I hitting the points? But when you stop worrying about, what's the other person receiving, and you focus on why you're saying it, and, your intention is to connect. And, I'm just talking as if I'm talking to you, Sergio, because that's exactly
Mhm.
what I'm doing. But as I tell the story, that's much more engaging. And so when we learn these skill sets, it allows us to express. And that expression is what allows others to be drawn in, right? Because we're not here to pontificate. We're not here to, you know, this is what you need to know, follow these, steps. It is, hey, this was my experience and let me hear yours. And so when we can break down those barriers that people often have, it allows us to get into the experience with them, right? Those most compelling speakers that we watch or the stories that we see, the reason they go viral is because we're drawn in. We want to hear more.
Right.
And when you're tapped into what you're saying because you've just had this incredible experience, it's very easy to share. Um, and one of the comments that we have in the chat from somebody who's watching, Roger has commented that a really great way to help us terrestrials who are not maybe going to have access to space in this lifetime, for whatever reason, VR experiences could be a really great way to bring that experience to others. I know Sen is doing a lot with incredible 4K footage of the Earth, and they have been putting up satellites. They were on the Earth Space Show on Monday. But I have had some of these VR experiences. There's an art space here in Austin. It's called Wonder Spaces. And I think they're in a few places around North America. They might be international as well. And they are interactive art exhibits. And one of them was you put on this VR headset, and it's an 8-minute experience where no matter which direction you turn and look, you'll have something to look at. So you really feel, because you're immersed in sound and this visual, you feel like you're there. It's a bit disorienting when you take the headset off to go, oh, I've been in
Right.
this room the whole time, right? And that could be a wonderful way for us to bring that experience to everyone at SpaceX, for example, or everyone at NASA, so that they can get a taste of that experience that their colleagues went through. And for just everyone else here at home, right, to be able to go to a Wander Spaces or come to Stellar Access when you have your open events, right, and be able to get a taste of what it's really like to be in that environment. And that creates awe and inspiration, and that'll help spark this joy that we can all tap into.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Roger's bringing up VR in the chat, because I was going to touch on some of those elements that he posted there on engaging these other ways, or bringing about these other ways of how to engage in space, and then push beyond that to some of the things that we as Stellar Access have been doing to be able to bring about new perspectives, since this is all about perspectives, into the ecosystem. A couple of those areas is we've been working with a couple of companies that have never even realized that space was accessible. We met them at South by Southwest, is a festival in Austin, and they are building a entertainment, but more of a wellness system for, that uses acoustics essentially to relax your body, which I have tried, and it's incredibly relaxing. And one of the things we brought to them is the opportunity to bring this technology into space in a way that allows for those creature comforts that people are going to want to have when we are in the space station, when we have people traveling from Earth up to space stations. Bring those creature comforts up there, but we're going to have to be creative about how do we actually apply something like this in space, and be able to research and be able to implement these into the new spaces that are being built. We've also talked to some directors and entertainment, people that want a studio, of course, or even an artist that wants to have either do some type of music at one of these space stations, or actually have a concert in space, which would be a grand initiative to have a grand. I'd love to see a one of my favorite bands perform up in space and be able to have that come down to us here on Earth and now say that we are actually space inhabitants, spacefaring people that are living, working, and having entertainment in space.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when we think about the future, we don't want to just be in some concrete block building or in this, kind of see-through thing and have no aesthetic anything, right? I mean, even the most technical person that will say, "Oh, I'm not creative, that stuff is not a big deal." I'll just simply invite them to think about their home and how many things they have in their home or in their workspace that are there for pure aesthetic reasons only. It serves no functional purpose except it's pleasing to have it there. So if you've got art on your walls, if you have plants around you, if you install different light bulbs, if you have a little figurine of an astronaut on your desk like I do, these are all there for the aesthetics, right? And we will enjoy these experiences. My guest on last Friday on my podcast, Brent Fisher's very, very into space. And he talked about this as well and hoping to see, music in space one day. And it would be amazing. And it'll also be an engineering feat to think about because sound will operate differently. Instruments may not work the same as they do down here. So what will they do and how will they navigate those challenges? That's an example of the technical and creative coming together. Even a concert that we listen to, music is very mathematical. And yet it is evoking emotion in us. So it's also creative. And you need the technical side for the instruments, when you plug it in, when you've got the sound engineering, it can sound very different based on those. And if the AV is not working properly, you don't have the same experience. And so that's a beautiful experience to mention, Sergio, because we will have a lot of these exciting things to look forward to, but they will also present with their own unique technical and creative challenges.
Yeah, they will. I mean, we continue to work with these companies that can bring about a different perspective, a different view of Earth. And, I say view of Earth because Liam just posted that a link where you can go and view some of the views from their satellite, Space TV One. Or when Space TV One is installed here in the future, you'll be able to see more. And so we were working with Sun TV and Liam and his team to figure out how do we transform what they're doing and bring it about into, again, the space access providers, the major companies that have the assets to have these physical resources in space. How do we change their mindset that it's not just all about science? Science is key. Science is something that we actually need to continue to develop in order for us to become, a species that lives on other worlds, on the moon and Mars and other planets. But people want to engage, in a way that allows them to connect, right, with what space is about now, with what moon is about now. Working with Sen, we're trying to figure out how do we inspire our space access providers, our partners there that provide that access. How do we inspire them to make that connection so that it becomes more grounded in what people can access now, right, as opposed to the science and the research that may be years off to be able to live on the moon, but it becomes more accessible to them now so that they can then get creative about the partnerships we can form and the business, elements that can be created from that.
That's a great question. And when I think about changing mindsets and shifting perspectives, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And so it's not about trying to force change or to force this upon people, because then you're going to just get the back and forth ping pong of whose view is better and which one is right, and becomes very polarized. So when you're talking about perspective shifts and the invitation to a new way of thinking, it's about keeping the door open just a little bit so that as people walk by, they're like, "Oh, what's that light? oh, I hear something. They get curious and they go in the door themselves rather than you trying to like shove them through. And so it's about celebrating the small wins. What are some of the small wins that we can have? Yes, we would love this to take place, but can we work backwards from there and celebrate the small moments and recognize them for actually being quite big, especially as we're talking about shifting a safety focused, very technical mindset around space. And, long termism is important. Why are we doing all these things today? It's not for you or me, it's for the generations that are going to come, it's for the future. And we need to bring that viewpoint in. And there's a really great book by William McCaskill about this. And it's called What We Owe the Future. And I remember when I first picked up this book, someone had recommended it, one of my space connections. And I thought, yes, okay, long termism is important, but I doubt this book will fully change my mind, right? Like, I'll read it. I want to read it. And he did such a wonderful job of outlining why I today should care about generations from now and what I can do to help impact that it totally shifted my thinking. And I could feel myself just little by little moving along. By the end of the book, I was dumbfounded. I was like, wow, I did not expect going into reading this book, knowing what it was about, that I would feel so strongly about owing the future something rather than just thinking, well, my lifespan's going to be 80, 100 years. Does it really matter if I do this? I'm one person. Can I have an effect to, wow, this is a really important perspective, and maybe I can do some things differently. So I would encourage people to think of it that way. What's the little taste, right? What tastes so good that you want to come back for more? And how can you get other people to be curious about what you're doing because you're having so much fun? And you're starting to show up differently, that they then start to ask you questions, because curiosity really is the best bridge to connect two different things.
And one of the things that really intrigues me and that makes me excited about being in this industry is that concept of, doing what I'm doing now is not necessarily for my specific benefit, but for benefit of future generations. I know that as a engineer designing space vehicles and space processes and all these things that we need to get to space, I'm not going to get to see the realization of a lot of these. I doubt that I'll get to see somebody landing on Mars. I'd love to, but I doubt that I will get to see that. But it brings me great satisfaction to know that I had a part in making that happen for future generations, right? And I get that a lot from a lot of colleagues and a lot of people that are in this industry as well. It's that passion for not only exploration, but education, understanding about our world and how we're able to give something of ourselves to this industry in a way that builds the building blocks, the foundation for future generations who then take benefit from the foundation we built. And so I guess the question for you, Sarah, in this generation, at least as I understand it, I know with my kids, they're very what's in it for me now mentality. How do we open up their perspective, right, to be able to see that they're contributing to an industry, or that we're opening up the doors for them to contribute to an industry, to this generation to contribute to an industry that will maybe set the foundation for the next one, right? And it's not instant gratification. It's something that's going to take a while. But that's been tough, even in business, as I go and try to engage other businesses to be other industry to be part of this business, of the space business. It's, well, how can I get the benefit from it now? So that's the question really we need to answer. We're going to push forward and bring in more of that industry into this ecosystem.
That is a really good question, because every generation always thinks that the next generation coming in is about instant gratification and has to rush and, does things so differently. So we always have these evolutionary shifts between generations. My biggest thing would be to help them understand how they as an individual play a part in the system of the whole. Western culture typically tends to be hyper individualized and celebrate, the you must do it all yourself, which is not sustainable, right? And this is why we have this epidemic of burnout and people with fried nervous systems and mounting debt and this doom and gloom view of the future, versus a very collective experience. Little kids in Japan clean up after their lunch time and they clean the cafeteria and it's so orderly, and they see something and they pick it up and throw it away, right? Because they understand the role that they as an individual play in the larger collective. So we can start to take our children to places where they can experience that, whether that's to a museum, whether that's through some sort of like ropes course or like the outward bound type programs, going out into nature and realizing, when you go camping or you see these awe-inspiring views of the night sky where it's dark, or having to work together as a team to make something happen, you start to understand it's not about what I can do for myself right now. Because when you have that community, I firmly believe that we feel loneliness when we are not supported in community. So when we isolate ourselves, that's when we get the anxiety and the depression and we get stuck. But when we have the ability to lean on others and we foster healthy relationships, that's when the support system is felt, right? And whenever we look at an individual success, we highlight the person, right? Even Elon Musk did not do it on his own. There were a lot of things that went into his success. But what do people see? They see SpaceX, they think of Elon. And so it's understanding that those systems around us will be interacting differently based on how we put our inputs in. And so, teaching them that way of thinking, I think, is going to be really important. And we all go through moments of instant gratification. We all want it now. We're all impatient. I still remember dial-up, hitting the button and all the sounds, going and making a snack, coming back, AOL Instant Messenger with my friends. It took 5 minutes to load a web page. Now it loads in less than half a second and we're frustrated. So, creating those experiences where we understand how we impact the whole is going to be really important. And I do see someone just saying, "You've got mail." Yes, I do remember that.
You've got mail is one, that resonated quite a bit with us in our generation. I agree, Sarah. I think, one of the reasons why I enjoy working in this environment, in this industry, is the collaborative nature of it. And the as much as we're trying to commercialize space, there's still not a almost not profit first type of mentality. We need to create this ecosystem where everybody's invited to the table before we start competing with each other. One of the reasons we teamed up with the Houston Spaceport at Ellington Field here in Houston is we teamed up with them to create this innovation center called Distill, where we are bringing in the collaborative nature of our space industry and gathering their assets so that we can provide those for companies that are not able to, can't afford it or are not able, don't have accessibility to those resources, and utilize, our collective ingenuity, right, collective innovation to push forward and build this neo marketplace that we're all clamoring for, but will not be built unless we work together in the manner that you described.
Exactly. And it is an ecosystem. And the other thing, to kind of circle back on a point that you made earlier, is why should science or scientists care about, other people adopting the idea? Because if they don't, your science will never be realized. It will, if enough stones are thrown, budgets will get cut, focus will go somewhere else. And, I just was listening this morning to, some Stoic philosophy and in the Roman times, and, how the these philosophers were literally put to death for their ideas, only to have the nation realize in a couple of years' time and adopt exactly what that philosopher was talking about. Right. And so it's important to spread the ideas and to connect and have these messages shared so that you can get the venture capital, so that you can have the realizations and the impact that you so want. It's not enough to just be a brilliant scientist. If you can't communicate those ideas and you can't make it relevant, then, they won't happen. And this is very common amongst highly intelligent people, because there's so much jargon, right? And we have to make it accessible so that we can continue to further those ideas.
Yeah, you mentioned that, being able to communicate ideas, being able to convey concepts that may be complicated technically, but we got to figure out how to convey those in a way that engage and inspire. One of my previous job before I took on this Stellar Access initiative was as a systems engineering manager, and one of the my main responsibilities was to guide these system engineers to think about how people are communicating ideas and extract information from them that allows them to design better systems. We talked about systems earlier, and how this entire ecosystem we're trying to develop with that enables marketplace space commercialization. It will be based on bringing in all those ideas and perspectives into the fold, and then churning them up and see what comes out. And so, guiding individuals of all types to be able to transform those thoughts, especially the technical people, into creative elements, is really the focus of what we at Stellar Access are doing, especially through our Distill Innovation Center, where we want to bring those creatives and those technical, people together to be able to, again, churn up those ideas and figure out what comes out, so we can build a better space stations, better opportunities in space for people in general, for travel, for personal, personal gratification, but also for business opportunities that eventually will be part of what we, in 10 years from now, I assume space is going to space, and having a space business is just going to be, par for the course. So we need to, start in innovating and instilling those ideas on people, so we can realize that in the 10 years time.
Absolutely. And, even just the name Distill, it makes me think of the distillation process, right? Where we're taking all of these ingredients and we're distilling it down and making it simple so that it's understood. Clarity is key. And, if we cannot explain it to a teenager, then it's too complex and
Right.
we're not able to connect the message. It should be so simple that anyone can pick it up and understand it. And then that's how it spreads, right? And so we need to continue doing our work to find ways to connect those dots and communicate.
Yeah, we definitely do. So we're hitting our hour here quickly, and I wanted to give an opportunity for folks to, type in their questions. There was a comment earlier about whether we're going to get to hear your poem from
Yes.
the Earthlight Foundation, so we can do that here. I know that Liam commented about, one of the more rewarding, times in his career was when somebody pointed out that they were utilizing the device that you had actually provided for them to view the Earth, or at least to know where the space station is passing by there. So yeah, those elements are key to us continuing to push further this, again, innovative spirit, engaging those young generations and older generations too about what's possible up in space. So unless there are any questions, we would love to hear your poem, Sarah, and
Yeah.
you can share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone who's listening to this, whether it's live or you're watching the replay, I invite you to close your eyes for a moment as I read the poem and let it take you on a journey. The title of the poem is Moonlight. Shimmering existence under the moonlight. Waves of reality, pushing, pulling, swaying to a cosmic tune, only heard at night. Life flows within me, an effervescent truth, beaming outwards as I smile upwards. Twirling, I breathe in the moonlight as I dance to the rhythm of night. Coalescing, evolving, being, falling still, I listen to the whispers of my intuition while bathing in the moonlight of midnight. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that with us. If any of you have any comments about, your experience, on what you just heard from Sarah, I know when I first heard it, it gave me goosebumps, and actually gave me goosebumps today as well. It brought me back to when I was a kid, essentially, and the whole reason why I got into space is of the unknown, and looking up at the sky, and obviously having moonlight, which is one of the things that you can actually almost feel, I would say, sometimes as you're out sitting about, especially when there's a bright moon, and realizing that there's this object out there that's emanating some type of energy that we don't even know much about, and made me think about what other things are out there, what other objects are out there that have this type of effect on us as human beings that I want to explore. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to explore all the cosmos, but be in an industry that allowed for that in the future. Again, harking back to what you said about preparing, making preparations in this generation for future generations. And that really what I thought about when I heard your poem back the first time at the Earthlight Foundation New Worlds Conference.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to share it again here today.
Let me see. Let me take a look and see if anybody has any other, comments or questions that we want to share here. Bumper sticker, if you can't get the message across in this way, that's you, Sarah, that you mentioned. Yes. So thank you, Roger. Yes, I think it's when you close your eyes, you definitely paint that picture in your mind of the moon beaming down on you. And very eloquent words, Sarah, to be able to paint that for us. And I would challenge the rest of us too on the call that we all have that creativity to go about and do put these words together in a way that takes us out of our technical days essentially, and puts us more in a creative perspective, so that then we can share that perspective with others in our community to be able to bring space to every neighborhood. Part of what we want to do at Stellar Access is, change minds that space is important. Space is something that you want to be a part of. Even actually, you're a part of it now. You want to be a part of it even more, even though you're not aware of all the things that are going on. And especially for business, space companies need space business plans now, because space is coming and they'll be left behind if they don't get going with what they want to do in space regarding their products and services that they offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sergio, I'd also just like to share a quick story about the poem that I wrote, because, I had written poetry when I was in high school, and then I stopped for, 15 years or so, because it wasn't useful, was not productive, right? And just really focused on the business or, communication, corporate communications, and just, really went into the type A linear logical brain in existence only. And Cyan inspired me to start tapping back into my poetry. So after I had seen her speak last year and we connected, I started writing again. And there was a call for poems last year about the moon. The theme was moon. And so I thought, okay, I like the moon. I'll write, I love the moon. I'll write something and I'll submit it. Submitted it, totally forgot about it. A couple months later, I received an email saying, "We're so sorry, your poem was not selected to be published." And I was like, all right, no worries. I liked my poem. I'll try again next time. And I just went about my day. And it didn't hit me until later that day that I was like, wait a second, that's the first time I accepted this was my poem and I wrote it for me and I still like it. And I just totally let go of it. In the past, I would have thought, man, see, why do you write? It wasn't good
Right.
enough. And I would have had that kind of mentality.
Right.
2 days later, I got an email that said, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. There was a clerical error. You are going to be published. Your poem was selected. Congratulations. And I took it almost as this test from the universe of, did you write this poem for the accolade, for the gold star, for the award? Or did you write it for you and you were just expressing yourself? And because it really was just my expression, it didn't matter if it was published or not. I
Right.
still loved it. And so that's the other part with this. It doesn't matter if this artwork or music or anything that you're creating is ever submitted, is ever seen or shared on a wide scale. If it brings you joy, that's going to unlock different things for you because you're going to show up differently. That'll impact your relationships and that'll impact how you show up at work. So I really encourage everyone here to allow themselves to play more with that and not do it because someone told you to or because you should. Do it because it lights you up, and that's going to unlock so much more for you.
Those are really great words of advice there, Sarah. I think we'll end with that part and make sure we, let our audience know to, take a look at their own perspective on space. Really, it's what we're here to talk about. There is one question here that I want to get in before we sign off, and that's Phil would like to know more about what you're up to in the future. What are your plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have coming up several speaking engagements. I speak about the performance that we have based on the speed that we're operating at. Most of us think we should be going really, really fast when in fact we need to slow down. And so I have some speaking engagements coming up. I'm emceeing the Analog Astronaut Conference, which is in just a couple weeks at Biosphere 2. I'm really excited about that. It's kind of a mix of like space camp, a conference, and a retreat all in one. And it actually ends on my birthday on May 12th. So that's going to be a nice treat to be there for that. I'll be at New Worlds again, which is going to be in Houston this year in early October. And if you'd like to stay up to date with my podcast or learn more about where you might be able to come see me speak, I've just shared my link in the chat. And you can also scan this QR code. All my social channels are on there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram. And my podcast streams live to the social platforms as well as YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to see new episodes.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And I'll likely see you in a lot of those conferences as we move forward with what Stellar Access is doing to educate, innovate, and bring in the dreamy element and actually convert those dreams into reality for businesses and individuals. Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
And hope you enjoy it. And for the rest of you on the call, and thank you for joining today. We will be having our next webinar series, which we still need to select a speaker, but we appreciate you tying in today and hearing all about perspectives in space. Hopefully this was inspiring for you and that you're able to take the information here and go have, think about your own perspective and how you can change either perspectives or bring perspectives to others that brings them into the space commercialization ecosystem. So again, thank you, Sarah, and thanks to everybody on the call for joining in, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.